Really?
Yeah.
That's like Ridge, right?
Yeah. Awesome.
All right, we'll go ahead and get started. I know with a smaller audience, using the mic isn't critical for this, but we definitely want to record this and make sure that everyone can see it. So thank you for being here this evening. I do know we're going to have some people join us. Director Glowitz, I know, will be here in a little bit, and I just heard that we're going to have some others join us. First off, you know, I think it's really important for us to come back together and have this opportunity to be able to meet today, just to talk about what we learned from the process, and most importantly, just thank everyone for your time and helping us out through this process. It's never linear. I've never been a part of any of these that have always just gone from point A to point B. They always zig and zag, and I think that the most important part is honoring that process, because when we do, we always get to a better spot by the end, and then our students win, we win as a community moving forward. So tonight, we want to talk and go over survey results, talk a little bit about our own reflections of what we heard from the community, turn it over to you to talk about what you heard from the community, and then talk about update on our board decision and consolidation. We'll take a break, and then we'll come back together, talk a little bit about the straw proposal based on everything that we've been discussing, get some feedback on that, and then discuss what are next steps for the committee moving forward. So that's kind of how we're going to move. Tonight we have Josh joining us from, who's been supporting us on the survey side. He's coming to us from Wisconsin. And I think you might be in a library today. He was in a coffee shop the last time we met with him. But he's doing dad duties, taking his kids to and from practices in Wisconsin. So we've caught him in, I believe, a library this evening. And he's prepared a presentation based on the surveys that we received, and giving us kind of an outsider's perspective on what he saw when he looked at our data. So Josh, let me turn it over to you.
Hi everyone, thanks for having me here today. Just as you heard, I am in Wisconsin right now. I'm between classes. I got one kid in the library, another kid in dance right now. And I work for an educational service agency in Wisconsin. And like Brett said, I did put together, took your questions, put them into a survey, and helped with whole distribution and deployment, as well as building up a dashboard to visualize the data. So later on, I will talk a little bit about some of the things that I found most interesting when looking at the data, and then I'm interested to hear what you guys all came about with.
Josh, do you want to share your screen? That might be easier so that you can
sure.
go through.
You bet. Okay. So I'm going to... I cannot share my screen with you. Can you enable that information?
So this PDF of his slides is in that same.
Josh, go ahead and try again.
Yep, got it. Thank you. Okay, perfect. You guys should be able to see my screen now.
Yep. Yes.
It's out of my way. So, perfect. So, start off really high level. You guys had 568 respondents. Almost all of them were residents, and the vast majority of them also had children in the district. So, one of the things I want to caution as we look at all these results is to recognize that even when I compare the differences between how those with children and those without children responded, know that it's a very small minority of all your responses actually were reflective of those with children. One thing I will say though is that you had roughly 90 responses or so. So that does give us a little bit of an idea of what what people without children would be responding to. I mean, it's small, but it's just barely enough that we might be able to start extrapolating a little bit more information from it. So overall, you can see that your community has does support, or at least those who responded do support by a large majority, the bond referendum, and with only 22% saying no, absolutely not. And that holds pretty much true regardless of whether they have children or not. You can see you have a little bit more support from those with children. But what I found interesting is that those who were against it were equal. So the only difference between those with children and without really lay in the undecided. That those who are against it are against it, and that you have just a little bit more room to educate, more room to persuade those without children. So you can say that those without children have not quite made up their mind like those who have. But even when you do look at the kids...
Josh, would you do slideshow? It'll make it just a little bit bigger for us.
How's that?
Yep, thank you.
Okay, great. Does that make it easier to see, or should I zoom in a little bit more?
Yeah, no, that's
good.
perfect.
I think that's great.
Okay, awesome. So as we're looking at this, even so, everybody does have a percentage, 16%, that still need a little bit more information as we're going through. And that sort of fell into the comments as well, where there were some people who just said they don't know yet. They need to make some more time decisions. They'd like some more information. This I found interesting as well, so that those who did not attend the presentation are actually more likely to support the bond. So as I was thinking about this, I came up with two initial thoughts. One, I mean, it's not to say that it's, you could be tempted to say that those who attended heard the information and thought, no, this is a bad idea, and that the presentation actually dissuaded people from supporting it. But I think what's more likely is that those who attended the presentation were those who hadn't made up their mind. Those who did not attend, they already knew they were going to support it, and they didn't need to quite make up their decision. Now, I mean, that's just my opinion. I think that could be a little bit more of a further follow-up if you did decide to start serving your population a little bit more, talking more with people who didn't attend and find out why they chose to support it and those who attended why they chose not to. But I know, speaking from myself and my wife, we are very supportive of referendums and likely would not have attended this just because, like right now I'm in a library, I don't have time to go to sit through a presentation that I know I'm already going to support. So what I caution you against when you're looking at this is to think that the presentations were ineffective and instead start thinking about other reasons why those who were attended might vote no more than those who did. And please feel free to stop me at any time too. So when we're looking at the scenarios, there were 5 choices, one of which was don't do anything that no improvements are needed that require a bond. For the rest of my presentation, I'm only going to be showing you 3 because the 2 options that involved only the elementary schools and didn't touch on the middle school, those were so far below the other 2 that the community just wasn't supporting them, and I want to put my efforts into showing the differences in just these top 3. So, looking at this, when we talk about people who have their favored bond scenario, you can see 62% of respondents, I'm sorry, I need to change that, 64% of respondents were supportive of some referendum in those top 2 tiers. The reason these numbers on top are different than the bars on here is because when I wrote the presentation, there were roughly 20 or 30 fewer responses than there are now, and I went and I updated the graphs, but I neglected to update this up on top. So you can see it did change a little bit with the more responses that came in. When we start breaking out the difference between those with children and those without, you can see that those without are going to be a little bit more supportive, or I should say less supportive of those top 2 scenarios. But those without children who do support it, they are still favoring those top 2 decisions. Everybody across the board, regardless of how I broke up by demographic groups, it was always finishing the middle school, working on the high school, and then the second choice was also adding or replacing elementary school. No group by any majority supported the last 2 improvements. with that focus just on the elementary schools. Again, something else that I found interesting, so those who did not attend the presentation, once again, they sort of bucked the trend a little bit more. Rather than supporting just the middle school and high school, they are more supportive of the middle school, high school, and elementary school. We can come up with a number of reasons. Either those who attended the presentation heard the evidence and really just said, you know what, the elementary schools are fine, we don't need to work on them. Or conversely, you could argue that, again, those who didn't attend the presentation already made up their minds, knew what needed to be done, and that's what they're going to support. But regardless, you can see those top two still hold steady. Now, one of the things that I found really interesting that you guys did was you asked the question, what do you think the community would favor? And this is a really powerful question because there has been a little bit of research that the wisdom of the crowds, it's called the wisdom of the crowds, there's actually, I believe there's a book titled that, can actually be a more accurate prediction of how people are going to vote than when you ask how you are going to vote. In the last couple of elections, I was trying to find some specific research and I couldn't, but in the last couple of elections there has been certain polls that they found when they asked who are you going to vote for versus who do you think your community or your social networks are going to vote for. That latter question, who do you think your social networks are going to vote for, proved to be more reflective of how people actually voted. So I was really glad you asked that question. And for this, it was comparable, that whole no improvement necessary set question, that third choice, that remained steady for both what you are going to favor and what the community is going to favor. It sort of was the same. But there was a little bit more difference in those first two, and when asked whether you would favor the first, that scenario where it's just the middle school and the high school, you know, there was more of myself voting for the elementary school than when you asked about the community. As soon as you asked what my community is going to vote for, the numbers started increasing for finishing just the middle school and high school, ignoring the elementaries. And the same thing that when you're looking at the children versus not, there wasn't a whole lot of change between in the no improvement groups, but support for the replacing the elementary school dropped, as I've noted before, for the group as a whole. And then when we start looking at the people who attended versus not, the middle school, high school option still remains the most popular, and the support for replacing the elementary school drops. And it didn't drop and move to the no improvements needed, it dropped and moved to the middle school, high school option. So again, everything, the no improvement needed holds steady regardless of the group or whether it's yourself or your community, but the finishing middle school and high school really starts picking up a little bit more. A couple things that I found interesting when we broke it down just by the schools. So when we look at the schools and what you're looking at right here is a breakdown of responses by the schools. The numbers beneath the school names, that represents the number of respondents from the schools. You can start drawing, getting a little bit of context there. And one thing you'll notice for the next few slides is that Northwood Elementary, those parents buck the trend. So even like to a large degree, you can see those last three here, the finishing the middle school, replacing the elementary school, and improvements to the high school, that bar is higher than the first one, which is different from the, when we look at the group as a whole. But if you look at Northwood, by a large portion, that bar is significantly higher than that red bar, which is just the middle school and high school. So I'd be very interested to know a little bit more about that Northwood community because they're different than everybody else in how they're answering.
They have the brand new school,
So
they know
then
what
that's
that means for their kids.
Yeah.
So they have a brand new school and so they recognize the value of the new school, so they want to make improvements to the other one, is that?
Yeah. They want us to have the same school opportunity they have, is what I would think.
Okay, interesting. So clearly, if you the new school that you have is a hit with the parents. So that's, I mean, you're doing something right in that regard. It'd be interesting what the rest of the community, how much the rest of the community knows about that new school. Because when you look at the other elementary schools, they're clearly not envious of Northwood. So I wonder if it's just because it's the dollar amount, or if it's they don't know.
I think there's a pretty big sample selection bias with it, because I think a lot of the people who came to the presentations are from Island Park, and were scared that Island Park would be closed down, and interpreted supporting fixing elementary schools as closing their elementary school down.
And Northwood
I
has
think a
zero
lot of
chance
this
of
is
closing
swayed.
down.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the answers just wait for that one reason.
So I think if the question had simply been rebuild Island Park Elementary School as a new school, I think the numbers would be vastly different.
I also think if you went back and asked them today, now that they know that the school is not going to be closed, it'd be interesting to see what changes would be to their answers, because I know they were also concerned about it. You don't want to rock the boat in any way that would make it that the school would close. So.
I'm sorry, I missed that whole speaker, so if that's anything I need to know, I can
No,
hear.
you're good. I got the important.
Okay. Anything else on this slide before I move on?
Just pause for a second, because we were talking. Let's look at it for a second.
Look, it obviously shows that the vast majority, not the majority, but Island Park Elementary School is overwhelmingly represented in the people who voted.
Yeah.
And Islander Middle School would likely be because they also have a kid in the middle school, because you can select all the schools, same with the high school.
Yeah.
So I would suspect, or they might have a student who is at Lake Ridge for a high cap classroom or whatnot too. So I think that's where some of that skews come.
Yeah.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, so communities, not this, so this sort of goes with what you were saying as far as Island Park holding a little bit more sway, and Northwood, the parents, or the people over Northwoods have the new school. You can see immediately Northwood drops down to, the quote-unquote normal, and when asked about what the community is going to support. So I found that interesting. So I think this we already knew. Community overwhelmingly is against consolidation. So that was clear across the board, across groups. Nobody was in favor of that. And except for Northwoods. They were all for consolidating. You can see this, they're the only one. Everybody else, a huge percentage were against consolidation, Island Park especially, but Northwoods was for consolidation. So, again, if they have a new school, I'm not sure why the new school, though, would play into wanting to close another school.
They would have no chance of their school being closed.
Well, there was no chance to begin with.
Well,
But I could see,
No, well,
if their school...
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Say again?
Oh. I was just saying that because they have the new school, there would be absolutely zero chance that their school is one that's closed.
Sure, but when you said Island Park is the one that they thought they'd be closing, has that been announced? Like, if we consolidate 3 schools, Island Park's the one that's going to be closed, or is that just what people are assuming?
That's the one that was most contemplated, yes.
Okay.
The other thing we could think about with Northwood is, though we're starting to see a turnover because the school is 7 years old, you still have families who went through a move, so they were uprooted from their school. And so they're also looking through the lens of, we've already done it, it wasn't that big of a deal, or, hey, this is just part of it, we had to go through being uprooted. So you could have some of that as well.
And it's the seniors this year were 5th graders, and everyone, obviously mostly the Northwood students were uprooted, but students from every school were moved, and so it's the 5th graders are now seniors, so we're coming to the...
I think it's also I was going to say, I think it also may be the demographics of the school, where they live, where they're They're tied to the island, they're tied to living in the area for some respect of it compared to some of the other schools.
Moving on, so looking at this, talking about, so we already know that people are against consolidation. But if we look at continued setting conversation, this I have no thoughts on. So people who did not attend the presentation are less, so continued setting consolidation has more support amongst those who did not attend the presentation. And why I found this interesting is it sort of bucks the trend about what from my personal experience where I said I wouldn't attend the presentation, I'm all for the referendum, so we're good to go. So here, you have more support of those not attending the presentation, which really tells me that the presentation, whatever evidence you supported, or whatever evidence was presented in the presentation seemed really to speak against consolidation, or sort of conversely, where those who didn't want to attend already made up their mind about the referendum, those who made up their mind against consolidation wanted to attend to really make sure their voice was heard. So, I think that could be, again, less about what the presentation was itself, and perhaps more against the opinions that people had and the reasons for them coming to the presentation.
I think one reason people wanted it studied more is because the consolidation was tied to enrollment levels, and that is something that's still in flux. We're not sure where our enrollment is going. So the thought is, let's keep studying this before we make a decision to see if those, what the demographer predicted actually comes true. Because we did have a little bump in enrollment this year, which gave folks a lot of hope that perhaps we're on an upswing with enrollment. So yes to what you were saying, but also because this is so closely tied to our enrollment levels.
And I heard a lot about enrollment levels. That's all about, again, I'm sorry, I couldn't really hear too much.
Speak up, you guys. I think I'm pretty. I was just saying, I think it's because it's tied to enrollment levels, whether we would consolidate or not. And the enrollment levels, it's a prediction. And the community is wanting to see if those predictions actually come true. We had 2 demographers look at it, and so there's some question as to whether or not the predicted enrollment is going to be what our demographers say, because we did have a slight bump this year over what was predicted, which was a hopeful thing. It's that's great. So I know for some folks I know that didn't go to the meetings, they want to keep an eye on the enrollment levels before decisions are made. And I think that's kind of what our school board concluded as well.
And to add to that, I think that plays into Bond 1 versus Bond 2, that the support for middle school, high school, and not touching an elementary school is also a delay tactic to see so it gives more time to make that decision as they see enrollment play out over the next several years.
And a lot of these responses I know they're very complex. It really is 2 referendums, as one is consolidation and one is new buildings. When I talk to people, I would really try and have them separated out. You can't have one discussion without the other, or they're meaningless. But now that we've gotten through the first part, we can really start to focus on the second part. And I think that if we ask these questions again, I agree that delaying elementaries right now makes sense for those reasons, exactly what you just said. But I wonder if people are going to be, frankly, a little bit more honest about the actual condition of our elementary schools, because we're going to be spending money now on not fun things, roofs and boilers, and that's not fun to spend money on as opposed to new schools. That's what the community wants, and a lot of it makes sense, sort of. But I think that our responses would be really, you couldn't have one conversation without the other, but now, like what Fred was saying in terms of the zigzags, like this was so needed and it was a little bit brutal, but it's going to help us move forward and make better decisions that hopefully people will be more educated about.
We have a clear direction.
We do.
I just think doing this again would be very eye-opening.
Yeah.
Now that they don't have to worry about one, to your point.
And going in with a proposal of, I mean, do we do middle school, high school, or elementary? And yeah, I mean,
It would be really eye-opening. I think it'd be different to some extent.
All right, next one, Josh, you're doing awesome.
Okay. Consolidation, again, just talking, oh, this is interesting. And really, I think, from what I understand, consolidation is off the table. So it's sort of a moot point, but consolidation really hurts support of the bond referendum regardless of child status. So even those without children in the district, they'd be less in favor of the bond if you were to go through with consolidation. And those are my highlights. I didn't have anything else that was really earth-shattering to look at, or anything else that really stood out to me outside of what I just addressed. Did you guys have anything that you wanted to look at? Any questions that you had? Anything that you wanted me to come back to, or look at the dashboard as a whole instead of just my slide deck?
Actually, can I ask one question? For the children not, or for people with no children in the district, is it did you differentiate between no children at all, or children formerly in the district or not yet in the district? Is there any breakdown of that?
We did ask that. Let's go over here, go to the live dashboard.
Because preschool association is really active with this as well.
Residency by children attending. You know, I can do that though real quick. Let's take a look at that. Is there a specific question that you want to look at it breakdown or just in general?
I mean, Mercer Island is a very much a bedroom community. So we tend to, with bonds, have the biggest challenge with retirees who probably mostly had raised their children in the district. So I'm just curious if it's like parents of recent grads who really still feel a connection to the district, or it's grandparents whose children are not raising their own kids here who don't feel a connection. Because that's always, I mean, what worries me is right now our bond pass rate needs to be 60%, and we're barely at that with these responses of people who are really committed. So unless we can get that changed, the pass rate, I mean, we're still going to struggle big time. So I'm just looking to see who, I assumed it was mostly recent grads who responded.
The preschool association will.
And
I thought we asked the question here.
We asked for an age demographic, there you go. And then if we compare that with, did you have kids?
But we didn't ask the age of children.
Oh, here we go.
But if you get age of respondents,
Yeah, you get
and
something,
if you
right.
have kids, that'll give it.
except for mine.
Okay, I've got age of respondents broken down for sure. But yeah, by responding age.
There is, I wanted to make sure. Do you live on the island but have kids but they're not on tablets?
Okay, so looking at this, vast majority of people who are in the 35 to 49 age group, so they're what looks to be parents to me. And when you're looking at this, let's see, what do we have? Yeah, there's only 3 responses of the kids. But when we're looking at this, regardless of age group, they are in favor of bonds, even though 66 and older, there are 43 of them, you still have plurality, 44% that are against for it, with another 33 who are undecided. So again, a small sample size, but you're still working with current career retirees.
Which is good, because that means if that were to hold true, you only have to flip half of them to get to 60.
Yep. We're going to.
Half of the undecideds.
And then let's look at this.
Can that change before this goes out? Okay.
page 2 are 66. No, they're sort of split across the board there. Wait, this is wrong percentage, that's why. There we go. So when you're looking at our 66 and olders, you can still see no improvements needed is the highest, which is unfortunate. But when you combine the top two, for the finish in middle school, and for both of those, there you can see that it's just taking the lead again, so they're at 52%.
What's the undecided? Is there
Say
an
again?
undecided on that, Josh?
There is no improvements, there's not decided.
Okay.
This is one where we're locked into making a choice.
Yep.
And if we go over here, let me fix this one too. There we go. Sort of mirrors, not too different. Actually, it looks a little bit better. So the 66 here, over 66 goes from over here, 33% of themselves would support the first one. But when you start asking what the community was, now even they're saying it's going up there too. So it's at 44%. So overall, I mean, even at the higher ages or the retirees, as you said, it's still looking pretty good for support. I think the community at large seems to recognize the need.
Well, Josh, on behalf of our district and I know our committee and others, thanks for the partnership on this. I think we're going to have more surveys in our future, so we'll probably be working with you even more, but just having you be able to quickly manipulate the information, but I think also looking at it from an outsider's perspective into what we've been doing. Just want to thank you for helping us throughout the process.
Yeah, this has been great. I appreciate the opportunity to work with you.
All right, well, I'll be in touch with you. More to come for sure, but I know you've got to get on to your dad duties as well, so we'll cut you loose tonight, but thank you very much.
Awesome, thank you. Have a great day.
Okay. So one of the things then that we, should I go back to HDMI or will it go over?
What did your husband say about Island Park? What was your husband saying about Island Park?
Oh, he was in the first,
Yeah.
and he's like, I went online and I filled out the survey and I said, do not consolidate. And I was like, okay. And I was like, we don't even need to have that discussion then, because you have a very strong opinion.
I had many people call me with their opinion of, I went there and all that, because my first comment to them was, I get it. I said, but if you want to have any sway or feedback, that doesn't matter. Like, you need to actually go with some information and data, because we all care about the schools. My kid did Northwood and Island Park, and there's a huge difference between the two, whether one building's new or not. And I'm like, that's great, and we all feel that way, but you need to go with something else. Like, you need to have some other backing other than just the fact that I'm sad my school's going away. I don't disagree with you, but come up with something else. Yeah.
So I think, we've had a chance to sit with that information longer than you have, I think we just put together some bullet points to say, what is the survey kind of telling us? And Josh hit on some of this, but consolidation overshadowed the discussion about the bond. The elementary parents are in support of the bond, but not the consolidation part. Parents are in support of a yet-to-be-defined bond and lean towards Plan C. That was the middle school, high school, kind of study the elementary. Residents without students in the schools are less in favor of bond, but there's still significant potential there. There's a third undecided. And then Plan C, finish the middle school, is the most supported option kind of overall, were some of those things.
I have a
Yes,
question,
Susan.
I'm just wondering.
Will you use the mic?
Sure. I'm wondering how many supported Plan C because it was the bond that was the least amount of money. And now that we add on all of the things that need to be done to our elementary schools, that number is going to be shocking again. It's not going to be 200, and I don't remember what it was for Plan C, but once we add the roofs, the boilers, the carpet, the painting, adding all, like connecting buildings, Plan C is going to be pretty expensive. Now, I haven't seen the numbers yet, I'm hoping we get to see those soon, but I'm hoping that's not why people were supporting Plan C, just because it was the cheapest option, because it's going to balloon.
Yeah,
Thanks for the elementary.
and we're going to get into that tonight a little bit, because we also have to remember that that's the difference between spending capital, cap tech levy funds versus bond. Because a lot of that stuff, and we'll talk about it later, will all be on the cap tech, which we've already approved, and so those are the collections that we're
But
getting.
connecting the gymnasium to Island Park would be part of the bond, because that's a building project.
We've contemplated it both ways,
Okay.
and it depends on what we want to do. We don't have to, I think those could be future conversations,
Okay.
for sure. So I think what we'd like to do now, was now the break for dinner, or one more?
slide, I think.
Okay. So what we'd like to do now is get a little bit more information about what you heard in case we're missing things. And so why don't we take Sandra this way and Susan this way, and we're going to have this group go to this whiteboard over here, and this group over here to this whiteboard. And we have a pen here. If you would just make some notes about what else you heard, and even if you're reiterating some of the same things, we'd love just to get the feedback now for you to be able to add in, yeah, I also heard this, or maybe we didn't quite touch on something to a certain degree. Okay? All right.
Hey, Dad, Dr. Breyer.
You don't want me to write.
You don't want me to write it for you.
Since there's only
I can type on it.
our communication was really important, the fact there was only 11
Awesome.
meeting, that this is concerning to me.
Oh, wait, then we don't have enough people.
Spelling with ineligible handwriting.
I can spell.
And dreams are these mirroring.
I
Often
feel like
has
we
to.
did not have meaningful discussions.
Did you open the whiteboard,
In
or
the
is
sessions
that?
I went to
No, it came
about
open.
renovating
sorry.
campus.
Then it's
Maybe
probably
it was that
seen
way.
there.
Just like
Now
never
you're
got
getting
there.
there.
Or
No
like,
meaningful
like
discussion
a
on it.
meaningful
Here's your
discussion about
ballot.
the elementary schools just
all
never
you.
happened. Right?
Everyone
Like
was
why we
staring like it
needed
was a-
safety or like
So what we
any
had in
of
the
that, like,
community?
it just, we're not
I do
really.
not like
Anything that you heard
That's
throughout
why
the
when I
entire
remember
process,
like,
feedback-wise, that
it was like,
we captured like the big bullet points, maybe there's
I'm just
more
hoping
things
it's not
that
because it's the
we
lowest
should
number,
be- that you
because
heard
that
that
number
meeting.
is going to change dramatically once we
I think at the session I went to,
We have
there
that.
was so much
Yay.
concern about consolidation
Okay.
that I don't think.
we're thinking ahead, we're already thinking ahead. We've been
I'm
sitting with this
sorry.
information for a
Yes,
long
we
time.
have. You saw it.
This is making it look like I don't know how to spell, and it's because it can't keep up with my
I thought this
writing.
was a
Look at this.
presentation about consolidation. Why aren't we talking about consolidation?
The other thing
I
I
don't
think,
understand why
it
we're
was
talking
really
about
confusing
it.
what was like operational
After
dollars
an hour
and what
of,
cap tech
like-
dollars was and what was bond dollars. Like that, like folks were just thrown. They're like, I want to raise all this money and I want it in programs. We're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like this is not, these are not, like just like,
Operations versus,
it was just like a misunderstanding about why are we.
When I say cap tech versus operations versus bond,
Programs. Yeah, programs. Yeah,
Programming, right? You were saying.
Or also bonds, like, right, because bond is for related construction, right? Like, we
Not taking on.
versus bond.
I'm not letting you guys go, I'm not saying the money, like, the different pots for the money. Our community does not understand.
Too granular, they want to know, like,
But
what's
it's not going in.
like
It's not
here,
going
but like.
anywhere. I know.
Well, and that I heard, so something I heard, not necessarily from the data, but I
Absolutely.
heard loud and clear from the community, was
We couldn't get to the.
we are not going to put money towards the schools until we
Another
know
major
the
thing I heard
enrollment,
both
our
from the
perception of the
presentation, but
enrollment
also just
problem
talking
has
to
been
people.
fixed. Does that
It's
make,
a
like,
lack
I
of
heard, we're not gonna
understanding
give you until
until
about
we feel like we have a good
funding
understanding.
and how there are different
And
buckets
mixed
of
in that
money
was
that go different
misunderstanding of a lot of our
places.
funds and
And
liking
people
what they are. But
say,
I heard loud and clear that
well, why
there
do
is
we
a,
want to build a new
there's a-
school
there's
when
a-
we need to reduce classes?
yeah, there's a population that
And
doesn't want to give the district
focus
any
on,
money until they bring the
issues
enrollment
that
up.
are very difficult
And that they
to
don't
manage given
believe
the
that our
clearing.
enrollment is going down, but it's,
Why are we
like,
doing
that's
this
just a,
all?
and it was
And
really loud and
not
clear in
knowing
the meeting that I
how
was
that
in.
funding works
That was the
and
perception.
They're like, we
how-
gotta get these private school parents, or
Like,
Taylor's
it's not
back, I'm like,
happening.
it's not happening. They've been there 3 to 4 years. Their
So
kids are
saying
established in the
no
community.
money until enrollment. Or
And taking into
and
account the surveys and all that, then you.
We learned
Actually, I think the biggest, for some folks, the biggest problem is
They know.
I know
That
that's
was
the reality. I'm
contemplated.
just saying
I
that
haven't tried to get our
parents who were
private school kids
voicing
back.
things in the meeting,
Didn't
they
understand.
were very clear about this other piece, and it was clear to me that they were gonna say no.
I didn't know.
Yeah.
Until they
They
felt
were
like
like,
that was.
you're gonna call those 500
Even
parents
though
to
I
figure out where their
know-
kids are.
Yeah.
There's like a, okay,
Yeah.
concern around, how do we say this?
Say no monetary
Because
support
they've got
until
some-
enrollment
They've got
perception
more
fixed.
apartment buildings, so we get to learn a little bit more.
Thank you.
You put one of your
The
kids in a private
factor that we've always used
It happens,
for
it
each
happens.
unit
And it wasn't because
reduces
what the school was doing,
Yeah.
not
the
the
students.
Well,
what this other school was
That
doing.
one
Yeah.
for us.
Yeah.
It's, we're getting mixed messages as to how
Like, people
many
are
kids
stuck
are
on it,
actually
and I'm not like, I
gonna
think
get
there's.
If the district calls you and you change your mind,
But I think these are-
if the district calls you and asks you nicely, would you change your mind?
I just was.
About sending them
Yeah,
here?
Fred did call.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was doing it, they're saying you have.
That, those are all
The whiteboard. I do, I have a junior who's in fourth school, but I also had a senior who graduated last year and went through all the rest around. Yeah, so.
Yeah.
But I think we got,
it's gonna make a difference if the district reaches
last
out. No one's
Until
gonna
perception.
make a decision about that until
Until-
enrollment perception fixed.
Enrollment, enrollment. Now I
To
can't.
add on to
It
the,
made
you know,
sense.
the district has made some mistakes.
And so
Perceived enrollment problem fixed.
Enrollment
And put fixed
decline
in
is fixed, I
air
think
quotes.
is the
Selling us a bill of goods.
Oh, yeah.
We're not gonna.
Perceived enrollment decline, or
so
perceived.
that's
See, I
actually.
don't just like veered off into like learning support,
Oh,
like why
well,
are kids
so-
going to
so my
family jobs, and
experience
it's like,
Past.
those kids are
They're
not coming back yet.
Yeah.
There is a cycle
Yeah.
that they will be there for a while,
I haven't
and
heard
they
that
need to come
from
back.
you anyway. I've heard it as the history, and that's.
It's
I think
exactly
it's
the
fundamental.
opposite.
Just
It's,
trust
well,
all the numbers.
we're good with Fred there,
Yes,
but.
yes.
And this is what's happening, so that's the distrust.
And I get it around.
I
don't wanna put fixed, because some people
One is,
Okay.
do I need fixed?
Yeah.
No. It just needs to be cleared up.
Yeah.
I just think that's a block in our community.
or
It is.
People
educate on
not,
building conditions.
like,
Because
getting that.
they're a mess and people, because they're, because
Missing.
Tony and his team does such an amazing job.
Like
keeping them
500
looking
students.
shiny.
Yes, the missing,
500, there were
and that
like,
number goes from 500 to
And then
1,000,
1400,
depending on
because if you add up the
cost.
last 5
Yeah.
years,
What
it's
actually needs to
like.
happen there, well then just replace the boiler.
My thing is, I feel like we just need to do what we need to,
Yeah.
to me, the kids we have, anyway, they're enough, and we gotta retain.
Well, I mean, a roof is
To
$1.5
retain.
to $2 million.
what was that point you
Right,
said?
so,
Distrust
and
of
we
the
had to fight
Nobody
fully
trusts
in
any of
the middle school.
Yeah,
because we didn't
distrust of them, yeah.
invest
And
enough.
the enrollment piece is historic, right?
Yeah.
People have been here forever. And the
Yeah.
minute Lakeridge got redone, there were 4 portables or whatever it was outside. Like the day they started, because they missed the
Do you want to
enrollment.
spend to fix, or you want to do
Like
it?
donors are big up enrollment.
I think it's enrollment, well, the enrollment's clear, nobody trusts
Is
it.
they did one where they.
And it's, that's a movie of science,
And
right?
everybody,
Yeah.
It's,
and they put prices on
you
everything.
just have to make your best
And
guess.
literally said, if you pay
And
for
people are,
this,
they're channeling.
and then they can show.
They distrusted the
Right?
those numbers.
And it was one of the
Yeah.
smartest things.
All
And
the
the recorded
numbers, the numbers, the
Anytime,
tax,
like
all
even the
elimination,
COVID numbers, when we had the
Right.
COVID dashboard, I was
Almost like we needed to do
president,
that.
PTA president of the high school at the time.
In-
It literally would be in conversations where
It's a little bit
the
different.
district is reporting
Scale,
these
right?
numbers,
But
but we think the
almost
numbers
that,
are much higher and
like,
they're not giving us correct. Like just distrust of information that is
Right.
given to the
And then
community
Because that's
about
the
numbers
fear
in
is,
general.
I'll give it to you.
There, I don't understand, like, it's a very interesting.
Well, and what are you not getting as a
It was,
result of
there
it?
is
Is we can spend however
about
much, I don't even know.
information that is shared.
However much we need to.
Do you guys know how close to
Place a
budget the
roof.
middle school project?
That comes
or
out,
the
it could come out of the capital, cap tech levy,
They're both on
which
budget.
typically
Yeah. Okay.
does.
So the median,
But
most
then
recent track
when
record
you're not
is good.
getting from the cap tech levy that we want to be providing. You're not
I would say the
getting
other
more
thing that people
performance
wanted
based
a lot
spaces.
of
You're not getting
last year
upgraded
because they wanted timelines
or
and dollar amounts.
You're not
And that's
getting,
we will not make
you know,
any
new
decision until we have a clear
equipment in
timeline.
whatever, you
and
know,
we
that,
need to
the
know dollar amounts.
iPads or whatever, like,
Distrust
you know,
of the
it
number that
needs
it
to
costs as
be
much to renovate as
what
it does to tear it down and build more. They're like, there's no way.
From because of the funding
We haven't
issues,
done a
and
house
then what are you
renovation.
doing?
We could have built a new one for what we paid.
Right, what is my money going to?
Well, I heard loud and clear
You
that
don't
people
see
do
it,
not want to
get
consolidate.
these things possible.
Yes.
And I know that's a repeated message.
Right.
Yeah, even a breakdown of, you know,
We're
this
talking
is
about
Island
just
Park, they
things
need
that-
this, they
Right.
need this, they need this, they need this, they need this. In summation, that's
I mean, when somebody brought up
$70 million.
why can't we just
or
be
have a
status
new
quo with all our
school
schools?
for $90 million.
Did you not
What is-
consider status quo?
And if we replace everything, we're needing a new school
I
in
also
30 years.
heard that, Brett talked about.
Yeah.
Or
right,
whatever
right.
it is, you know.
I think though there was some
Yes.
that it's like willingness
They did.
to accept.
Willingness to accept the trade-offs of a larger versus.
That is not something that people I was
To a lot of
talking to were willing to accept.
No.
Sorry.
That
They're-
a smaller
they don't wanna
school
hear
means
that.
smaller class sizes, a larger school means larger. They couldn't get the concept that it's actually flipped. Like,
people having to
yeah,
drive their.
there was a resistance to that.
Right.
I think we could do a slide that are like things we need to communicate better. Like, this is what we heard. How about things we need to communicate better? Having a school with 600, this bothered me. Doesn't mean that you're gonna have 30 kids in class. It means you have one extra grade.
Well, and based on our enrollment numbers,
One
building
extra
a
class per
school of
grade.
600 doesn't mean you're out of school of 600.
Yeah,
You're out of
Exactly.
school at 450, so you're
Right.
Well, we
concerned
can
about
do
the
it in
600 person
I'm
school,
not saying
and even
do
if
a
you
job.
build it
We
600,
did-
doesn't mean that's your elementary
Our
population.
capacity now is
It
not
just
West
means
versa.
that
When you
based
go to
on
redraw the
demographics, you're still
boundaries,
at like 450.
you've got a bunch of them.
Susan, I think we should start writing that.
Sorry, I don't like writing with this. I wish I could type it. Okay, so what do we wanna?
We didn't spend a lot of time on that.
Um,
Yeah, I don't know if we
So,
got
like,
it, but
the
yes,
600
you're right. What
model
were the
doesn't
implications
necessarily need bigger
of all
classes.
four schools?
But that's not what we heard. What we heard was there was a lack of understanding
Okay.
about the 450 versus
one thing that-
600.
Well, I would even just say,
We have to
I would
have
say
another way to
the
message.
benefits of large
The
versus
lack of
small.
trust on facts, and I think that's just our.
But I don't think we're not getting a large
We've got
school.
experts saying it's gonna cost.
We're not getting a
this
large
much.
school at this
It's
point.
gonna cost this much. I don't believe you.
Oh, really? They're doing stuff tonight?
We have
We'll-
to
we'll
have
dig
some,
into this
I mean,
more.
I don't know that we're gonna be that
So,
successful.
Yeah, I think we should have a quick break.
Now, but,
Everyone knows better.
Large school.
well,
versus
I
small.
don't, it's not even the, I can do it for less, it's the, I don't believe you.
Right.
Misconceptions.
And you can't- I mean-
Small school misconceptions.
Yeah, implications.
How about misconceptions over classroom size? I hope you don't believe it. Yes. Are you gonna move this? Thank you.
All these cool things that we put out there.
The other thing I heard
Yeah,
is
probably
people
change
thought
from
40% of the
I
bond is
didn't
gonna
know
go to the high school.
My kid didn't.
Like not covering 40% of the
And we're in the beginning, didn't have the deal and all
But
that.
that 40% was how much
Joined the
bond
high
was
school
going
second
on.
ago, and just saying, we're so emotional.
It's interesting
Right,
what
a
people
lot
do
of
with
this
the
has
information
nothing to do
that
with
was
numbers
available
and
online. And
facts
like what
and
they
truth.
pulled from those
Yeah,
slide
so
presentations of what
emotional,
became,
right?
here's what's going on.
And I've heard, like, it was never mentioned. I'm like, well, it's 6 slides. It was never mentioned that this or this. I can't remember what the thing was that was, I was like, it was literally on 6 slides. If I had the slide deck, I could show them to
You know what I
you
mean?
and circle
But that's the
things.
emotional
It could-
part of me, not
I think
the
people
factual, let's
focused
think about this,
on,
let's talk about it.
there was a lot of emotion.
You know.
And when
what
you're
we do
emotional,
portion
you get
needs to
tunnel
be
vision
part of it,
toward
right?
the data that
That
supports
you're gonna win.
what you
And
I mean,
think.
I can show a million houses to people.
Well, and it was
Yeah.
the
Give me
same,
their criteria over
like
and over
15
again.
people.
They walk in.
who were at.
And it's all about.
Probably all of
They
them.
just fall in love with
And
something and I
exactly,
think
and
they're
it
gonna
took
go
better.
nothing on your list.
Were they? I did know, I was like, I can't.
I want to always go back to that.
But I didn't know I really had.
I wasn't.
You only have 2 betters, and I've got 5 kids, totally, I'm in. You know what I mean? And that's the true emotion behind all
Like
that,
they did their
right?
job.
Similar to that, I don't know how much of
Stopped
this
the
was just
closing
a
of Island
couple
Park.
of people at the meeting.
That's
but
all I
kind of a
heard
long
was
shot of
congratulations to
COVID.
everybody that warriored through this and saved Island Park.
Trust
So,
in the
building on the
experience
same site.
of school over the past
Like,
4
we
years.
have separate, like,
But,
and
and I think there's, again, probably a sample bias.
I
The
think
people
we
who
were
came to
talking
the
about
meeting
this, and I
are
think it, like,
some of the
in our
most
heads, but, like,
impacted by
it's
that.
better to
But I think kind of the
how about, so what's the
during
confusion? I would say,
2020-2021 school years.
was not clearly
But
communicated
they
the
would get
benefit.
moved
Impact of that,
less
I think,
with
is
going to 3
playing a
elementary
huge
schools
role
than
in
they
their
would by
emotions and
staying
what's
with
going
4.
Or maybe like,
That they be shifting.
And you can say like, oh, look, if you look at
the
the
number of
timeline,
moves for a student was definitely not
was in
understood.
elementary school,
So,
while COVID was an
student
issue,
movement,
is now
not
no
under-
longer gonna be
Yeah.
in elementary
Building-
school.
probably could-
When we do a rebuild, it's not gonna register.
Because, like,
It's
some-
still all an emotional.
the kids
it's,
run every time.
Just before 6 o'clock, let's come back at 6:10 with dinner. So build dinner into this, dinner is in the back there, so you can keep going, but 6:10, let's come back.
I just have a quick question.
Well, I think we're now getting into confusion and not what transfers.
Well, but this is what I heard people did not understand, because I
So
heard
what's the
like, kids would be moved 3 times. I'm like, how?
there are
There
24,000.
was no scenario that had that.
Right.
But that
So,
did shift.
I need research
That's the only people I
You know what I
talk
mean,
to.
like
Okay,
the
so this is what I heard.
588 answer,
What?
the percentages were
Is it right?
how that translates
Yeah.
to everyone in.
Okay, how about this question? No, that's not ready.
Okay, we heard a lot of misinformation.
This
Oh,
is,
that's a good one, yeah.
that's more than mine, but
This is a pet peeve of mine.
if you can get
and I try to think about
10%,
it.
you're doing
I heard a lot.
pretty well on something
Right.
like this. If you can get more, it's even better, but
Yes.
it really depends
So
on
my
who's
friends
answering
there-
it too.
So I went to
And
dinner
we
party
didn't do a
Saturday,
random
and this
sample.
conversation came up.
This
They're
was
like,
very,
"We're not consolidating." Who's paying for this? I was
self-select,
like,
who
we
wanted
don't,
to be
I
there.
actually heard this, because, you know, a couple lawyers and a finance guy, and it's like, this is great.
Even if we did the math out.
Who's paying?
Now
And this
we're-
was mostly
The
Island
extra
Park that answered.
$100 million for us, not
What's
Yeah,
that?
it's mainly
This
Island
was
Park.
like,
They were-
And Island
how,
Park,
what?
that's why I think
So
doing
what they
this
brought up
about
was like
shared
all
these
these
four
people
people
would
would be a really
in the state.
interesting one
Money
now.
by
It's
this
all
only
things about the
3,000
table.
because per
Maybe
year,
some more
per year,
clear.
and now
Yeah.
we have $100 million
Because
more
right now, I think.
Because we have to
in
fix one of
today's
those.
dollars, but who knows how much it's gonna be, so that's.
I think our
so I'm like,
families who don't have kids are even, there's some bias there because you have a lot
hey,
of
great,
former island
who's
park
paying for this?
parents who, not necessarily former of the others. I think
I was shocked at that.
when we get into that study phase and we're really looking
Yeah,
at
We're not.
There's so much of it.
polling,
Okay.
yeah,
It's
let's
not
not
happening, but-
definitely.
And we're dead in the water, and if you
Yeah.
have that much of the community that passionate, your bond is dead. Like, you're tied, like.
Give us an answer if anything.
Yeah.
My concern is this, like historically, we've been trying to, we have, as a trying to rebuild this system.
Yeah.
I did hear that a lot of families didn't respond.
That's the
Rebuild
first,
what? Because they
real
were in
interest,
Island
that's the
Park,
first time it
so
came
they
up
were
and
like,
it failed. And
I
that's
have
not
nothing to
the
do with
innovation,
this,
but
Sarah
everything
Jones.
was
Kind
fine.
of.
Yeah.
There was
Like,
a
no,
yeah,
no.
that was just the message.
I was a PTA president, West
But they
Mercer.
tried it in '92, and that's when they did the big remodel on Island
Yeah.
Park,
I don't know
West
the
Mercer, and Lake Ranch.
That one, because there was another.
And certainly
deal
talk
on
over your dinner.
So
That
it
tried to go-
it's continuously
Gotcha.
failed.
Yeah.
It's continuously failed. We're talking.
Yeah, it may be very different. Do they have a much harder battle or less easy battle?
That was a rebuild.
Unswayed about it.
It's
Well, everything that has included elementary school.
Should we start
the
with that one?
Island Park one, that was
Let's get a proposal or two and take it back.
That was a really good year decision.
That did feel pretty good.
I was trying to figure it out, because to make it so we can fit it all in one thing, but
Yeah,
it's
so it's
okay.
a small one.
I think that's really funny that your husband was like, I made really
Oh, I told him, I said, well, I started sharing with them, like, we know. So we started talking about all this stuff.
And then we'll just start from the top again.
Yeah, that's all
It's
different.
like,
Yeah, I was trying that earlier.
Yeah.
Well, so for instance,
We're reaching up a little bit, but it's back.
I did, I brought it up a
And it's
little bit.
always
But,
Like,
kids are far.
like I didn't, did I?
You just said you were
Getting
talking to
there.
him, so I was like,
They're
oh,
like,
great.
I did,
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, well, we had a few minutes, so I was like, well, what do you think about that?
Yeah, yeah.
So, okay, so what did he say?
Yeah, I was showing
He
that.
talked to you about it.
Super cool things.
So I said, okay, well, if you don't want to meet, I mean, I said we should meet. He goes, already talked to me.
Me too.
So I was like,
Me
oh.
too.
But I know when we talked, you weren't going to, so.
No, I know, I'm sorry. I didn't, like,
Which is fine, I just, you know.
no, we ended up, yeah, so we ended up having.
I started the first day of school
Okay.
for Kelly Tran, and I did the first 5 weeks for her.
If I could, Jennifer, do you mind just walking us through your group, and then who would like to be the representative over here? who had the pen or who was?
No, I had the pen, I did my job.
Susan will be doing the other job right over here. So Jennifer, you want to start and just so that each group can kind of hear what the other one was discussing.
So, oh great, thank you. It was the feeling that there was missing information during the presentations. Information got lost, kind of got sidetracked by the consolidation. There was conversations about families not having trust in the district and just building a distrust from decisions made decades ago. A lack of understanding of district funding. Why build new schools when there's declining enrollment? There was a feeling of educating the community on building conditions, curiosity of where is the money going, how is it being spent, wondering why you're closing the school in the middle, why not one of the north schools like West Mercer. Again, a lack of trust on facts. Emotions played a big role into conversations. And there was also a feeling that a COVID shadow on trust in the schools. 2021 played a huge role in decisions and conversations. The timeline of enrollment was a conversation, and a conversation about families not wanting to respond if they weren't from Island Park and kind of leaving it to Island Park families to fill out the survey. And so their voices weren't necessarily represented in the responses.
Susan.
We had a lot of similar. We felt that during the presentations, there wasn't a meaningful discussion of renovating the elementary schools, and that came up in a lot of conversations that we had with our friends and family, is that they'd like some more information on that. CapTech versus operations versus programs versus the bond. Where does the money go? Where does it come from? I think there's a little bit of education needed for our community on, hey, what do these different pots do? No monetary support until perceptions around enrollment are cleared up. The whole, we're missing 500 students, I heard as high as 1,000 students, where are they? We heard at the meetings, a lot of people were saying, have you reached out to these people? Has the district called these people? So I feel like that's something that a lot of people feel needs to be checked off before they're willing to listen to anything else.
Not that we agree with them.
Yeah, this is just what we're hearing. This is what we're hearing. A distrust of the numbers, enrollment numbers, construction numbers, just a general distrust around the data that's provided. We heard it loud and clear, no consolidation, so that definitely is heard. The conversation around a large school versus a small school and what that does to class size, I feel like that came up a lot in those meetings, thinking that a school with 600 meant that we were going to cram 30 kids in a classroom, rather than, hey, class size stays stable, it's just there's more kids in a school. The bond breakdown,
Like is it 40% of the funding goes for the
oh yes,
middle
that's
school,
right.
for the high school versus what else?
Right, how does it break down? What percentage goes to each building project? So that might also tuck under districts of the numbers.
Yeah.
A lot of strong feelings came out in our community, for sure.
Goodness, pinch it will make it smaller. I think you're good there.
The information around student movement, the number of times a child would move during this, I heard a lot of, they're gonna move 2 times, 3 times. There was a lot of misinformation around that. I don't think there was a single scenario where we had a child moving 3 times. And then just generally a lot of misinformation. And I think that has to do with the really strong feelings.
Well, I think people don't want to read a lot. Maybe you could, yeah.
600 pages is a lot.
Do you know what I mean?
It
So
is, yeah.
that's the way our society will become.
Yeah.
Is we want the headline and the soundbite, and that's what we're all going to talk about.
But along with that is, but we are okay with you and we trust you, but we don't trust what you're telling us.
Right.
Because my feeling is, all right, I don't want to look into this. I trust the work that you're doing, so just tell me what to do.
Right.
Like, here's our goals, tell me what to do. We don't have that in our society anymore.
And I also think the really funny part about being so many kids in one school, the high school has them all. And the class sizes are not 40-some class.
Right.
A couple parents that have kids at the middle school were like, if they don't like the size of a 600 elementary school, wait till they get to the middle school.
Right. It's just a funny concept, right? Because they don't think all the way through.
Right.
Well, the fact that we're building 600 doesn't even mean in 10 years, their school population would be 600.
Right, true.
It would be 450.
Right.
Based on the demographics.
Right.
So, but they're like that 600 number stuff.
A couple things on our projections that you can have in your hip pocket as you're talking to community members, especially those who, have, how well are these demographers doing? What does it look like? Remember that it's the demographers plus what Matt and his team use historically, when they're projecting. The number that he shared with Cabinet this morning, we budgeted for 3,880 FTE, and in November, Matt, we were at
3,884.
Oh, dude. So you can't miss by 4, Matt.
That's coming out of your paycheck.
But,
I don't know.
yeah, we'll check that number and get back to us next week.
Can you check that?
But it really is, I think that will be part of the confidence in restoration, is getting those numbers out there to help people see, there is a lot that goes into it. There's a lot of historical information, and then we'll be moving forward from there. But I was really proud of our team that Matt heads up to hit it the way that we did. I want to turn it over to Deborah and Dan just to talk a little bit about the quasi-resolution, if you will, that the board passed, which essentially put consolidation, took consolidation off the table. So Deborah and Dan, do you want to talk about that from a board perspective?
Yeah, I think.
And then you have that mic there.
From a board perspective, after going out, hearing from the community, I think it was pretty clear, the reasons that's been discussed, that consolidation isn't supported at this time. There wasn't, I think, a feeling that there was the argument made that such a disruptive decision that would be, it would at least cause dislocations in community was justified at this time. And then the resolution sort of acknowledges the sentiment of the community. It doesn't forever bind by any means, like any future boards, like each one can do what it wants, but at least tries to put the table to, like the issue to rest for the time being, and to give a sense of confidence that that has been removed from like the radar for the foreseeable future, and to move forward.
As part of the resolution, was a percentage set on enrollment for when it would be reconsidered? Did that become part of it?
There's no resolution. It's just, no, we didn't do a resolution.
Okay. I listened to the work session, and then I missed the next one, to hear how that panned out.
Yeah, it's just an expression that for the time being, this board doesn't feel that the justification for consolidation justifies the disruption to the status quo, particularly given the central role that elementary schools play in community in our island, and lists some general factors such as total overall enrollment, school capacity utilization, other metrics, with, I think, the strong implication that any disruption to the 4 elementary schools needs to have a strong argument put forth on the table at that time of why 4 elementary schools is no longer feasible or tenable.
But you're going to put any numbers on it?
No hard numbers, but that there needs to be.
It's pretty clear that, I mean, the list, annual enrollment's the very first thing, is one of the metrics to consider for future.
Yeah, and this is not an exclusive metrics, but just that there needs to be a persuasive argument to disrupt the status quo. Like that's what it boils down to, at least in my mind.
So the way boards work, and we're in the middle of, well, we're about to change the composition of a board. So most boards are really respectful of future boards and letting them make the decisions based on the actual information at the time the decision's being made. So I think, at least that's why I didn't want to see a resolution. I can't speak for everyone, because I just don't want, that's much more written in stone. And we can have a position right now on this current board with these factors where they are right now, with the community input being a huge one, without having an undue impact on future decisions, because life changes, right? None of us predicted COVID, and who knows? If Microsoft closes tomorrow, it's going to have a huge impact on the island. And you could say, oh, that's not going to happen. Well, Boeing in the 70s, when we went from 5 elementaries to 3 elementaries, that was because of Boeing. So other things too, but in large part, Seattle closed down because Boeing left, and so, anyways, so that's that. We talked about having a number, and I think the end result was that we would get, so every year we get a report from the superintendent and a recommendation on open enrollment. So we take a look at our numbers, we take a look at capacity in the classrooms, and then there's also laws that impact open enrollment too. Once you take a kid, they are there until they graduate from high school. Their siblings get to come. You don't get to pick and choose based on, who's easier or less expensive. Open, there's none of that game playing. So if it's open, and it's, an application process, but really just is there a spot kind of process. So it's a great thing for communities, and it's a big challenge for communities. So we get a report on that every year. So our proposal was to get a report on capacity in the schools, and not just enrollment numbers, but actual capacity in the schools, because there was a really big misperception of classroom size and a new school and the size of the schools. It's like, no. I mean, we're now in combo classes because we've got smaller numbers of kids to pull from. And so, before we had our neighborhood schools, we could send the new kids coming in, oh, sorry, West Mercer's full, you've got to go to Lake Ridge. We don't have room for second graders at West. Well, we can't do that anymore because they're neighborhood, for the most part. At the very end of it, in the middle, there's a little bit of that, but not much at all. So it's combo classes, so then there's pushback on combo classes, and there's all of this. So we really said, this is now a conversation. When I got, it's like, you're springing this on us. It's like, this is a very emotional topic, and I would challenge people. I'm like, how should we have brought it up that you wouldn't be reacting in exactly the same way? I never got an answer on a different way to bring it up. It's like the first time you hear it, it's going to be shocking. But let's really look at facts. Teachers aren't going to lose their jobs because it's still the same number of kids. They're just going to be in different places. We are going to need combo classrooms. We are going to need a reduced number of specialists because they don't have as many classes to teach. So it impacts. Anyways, let's start looking at all of these factors yearly, including enrollment and capacity of our buildings, so that we can make these decisions every year and say, are we good? No to consolidation for right now in this moment in time, and continue to make that so that people are still going to say it's a surprise, but we can go back and say, well, we had this meeting and we discussed capacity and we discussed consolidation, and the decision was no changes at this time. And doing that in a yearly way. And I think that a lot of the arguments against consolidation make sense. I mean, we've got the, I've got an older child, so those with the littles, and the impact on COVID in raising your kids was very different from mine, who I could close the door and, have nothing to do with while she was in school. It's really different. And so, to get that feedback was really important. And then also, there was another point I was going to make about that. But anyways, we had really different, that hit home to me in terms of that was an impact that I didn't realize was as significant. So, and the trauma, and the teachers are still recovering from the trauma of that. So anyway, so that's where the board came down on this, with really looking at the long-range facilities plan, is about 4 or 5 years old now, and it is something that we have committed to looking at every year. So this really kind of lays out factors and kind of decision checkpoints that we want to be making during our facilities planning. And rather than resolutions, just have each board, come up with a statement like this, like here's where we are, here are the numbers, and we're good for now, or we need to start preparing, or whatever it might be. But that way, there's a lot of transparency, people will have opportunity to provide input. As much as we want to rely on facts, we know emotions is what carries the day. And that being said, I've heard from a lot of people on this committee, and we don't have a ton of people here today, but just as a member of the board who is involved in more of the decision making, I just want to really express my gratitude. I know I speak for others than me, but I don't want to speak for anyone else inappropriately. I really want to express my gratitude. It is not an easy process to be bringing something up and being a part of these discussions in a community that cares so much. There's days I beat my head against the wall. It's like, well, we're really doing the right thing, or we're trying and we're listening and we want to hear. And really, like when we say we want community input, we mean we want community input. But we have to bring something to the community to have input on. So here's what we've got to. And I would tell people, I'm like, really, the committee, it was very focused on economics and whether or not this community was going to support replacing 3 elementary schools rather than 2, and we don't necessarily have the enrollment to justify it. The message was received loud and clear. We're not there yet, if at all. And okay, so let's move forward knowing that it's going to cost, $150, $200 million more to replace another school. That's a problem for future generations, not mine. But I just challenge people and say, great, put your money where your mouth is, because we need to do this for our students. And but anyways, I'm sure you all felt fairly beat up during this process and during the community conversations. As much as you're still willing to do it, it's not easy. Trust me, it's not easy. And so thank you. And we couldn't do this without you, because we would have 0 credibility. We wouldn't be able to engage the community in the conversations. And like I said earlier, this set us up, I think, as we go, like even though, it was kind of a no, it set us up for success in the next route that we choose. And to be able to really go and say, we heard you, we listened, here's now the proposals of what we can do, and the committee heard that. And so I just think it adds a lot of credibility, and while it's a temporary no, I think it's really going to open the door for hopefully some really good conversations about, and involving the community, and really trusting that, the people that get involved really care, and hopefully we can encourage more people to get involved. So anyway, so thank you, and especially you Island Park participants or people with ties to Island Park, because as Sandra said, like we all love our schools. That's actually what I love, is every single family on the island thinks that their elementary school is the best from each of the 4. Even the early years at Northwood, which it's early years and it's definitely tough. It's smooth now, or at least it's a whole lot smoother, and people don't have those same, it's the comparisons, I think. But anyways, we want everyone to feel that way, because that's the best way for a community to raise our kids, is we don't feel like, and it's interesting, the numbers from Northwood and the others, that, it's just interesting to see. But anyway, so I just want to express my gratitude for participating, and hopefully, as we continue forward, and hopefully the board will support this committee moving forward. I certainly do, because I think it's really vital to have this hive mind, these discussions that people can watch, and then if they want to choose to participate, they can, and then hopefully just trust.
Matt and Aaron Battersby and I had a chance to meet with a consultant that we work with quite a bit, who's got a pulse on the region. And I think about the $800,000 figure and whether or not that meant a lot of money or not a lot of money. I think if I would have gone back to September a year ago, $800,000 when we were facing a $2 million loan repayment to ourselves and a fund balance less than essentially 1% and even in the hole, $800,000 would have sounded like a lot of money that I could have got behind saying, we need that $800,000 like now. Our board set some very clear expectations and parameters and got behind us and worked with us, and then Matt came on board with the team that he brought, and we were able to actually grow fund balance last year. And what we learned in our meeting last week is we're one of the few districts in the region who actually grew fund balance. We're one of the few districts in the region who's actually not deficit spending again this year, that will grow fund balance again. And I think because of those things, we can restore some confidence with our community. We'll be out there doing our budget roadshow and our HR roadshow in February. We'll have another big webinar. I'm going to do some conversation with PTA tomorrow. I gave a presentation to Rotary last week, just getting out there and talking about these things so that we're in a fortunate position where people say 800,000 isn't as big of a deal, because a year and a half ago, not even a year and a half ago, it was a really big deal. And so today.
I think one of the other misperceptions was the 800,000. It wasn't just one-time payment of 800,000, it was every year. And that's what's like, guys, it's not just 800,000. But thank you for being so diligent with our funds so that we have the flexibility to meet the needs of the community. So thank you for that, because that gave us wiggle room.
Well, and I think the value of 800,000 changes depending on how it's used in the context of the discussion.
Sure.
Not necessarily even like a year and a half ago to now, but if the district was misplacing 800,000, that would be a very different, like it's an interesting, like to me it was a very interesting perception of how easily it was tossed aside when it was talking about saving elementary school versus any other monetary accountability.
Right.
Like, it's an interest. It just was a very interesting.
That's an excellent point.
Well, and we also had been, the number, we talked about the overhead of running a four school, but no one had ever sat down and actually run the numbers. So we've been, up to $2 million a year, right? And so that's where that conversation even started is, I don't know, we can't do that. But then we found out it was 800, and no, it's not a small amount of money, but is it worth it? And clearly the answer is yes.
Yeah.
So I think as we look through, what we heard from the survey, what you had put up on the whiteboard, as we listen to really that difference between what I believe we can pass or what we should pass versus what I think the community, as we think about the bond scenarios moving forward, remembering that it's going to be a multi-phase piece. I think where we've come back to what we want to kind of put out before you tonight and gather feedback is the straw plan for discussion, which is moving forward with that Plan C in more of the immediate future, studying the elementary sites, determining swing school needs, taking a look at what do we need to do from a capital improvement piece for our 3 older elementaries. We're going to get into the specifics around the paint, the roofs, the boilers in just a little bit, but the potential bond on the ballot could be February or April of 2025, so just over a year from now, and then schedule future bonds, and we'll talk about some of these. But we would love for your perspective on this straw proposal as our first next best step.
I think I'm still kind of torn over how to include elementary schools or not. I think to some extent, I think the chance might be lost to work on elementary schools right now. And even with the work that the board did last week, I think that there still could be a fair amount of distrust with the district. And I could see people voting against a bond that included any real elementary rebuilding, thinking it would still result in closure of an elementary school. And that there might need to be a fair amount of time, and I don't know if another year and some months in the future is enough time for people not to fear that, unless we're replacing Island Park, that a vote for the bond would be a vote to close an elementary school at some point. In my mind, that's kind of conflicted with an idea that maybe with consolidation off the table and discussing things again and really trying to emphasize, the condition of the 3 elementary schools and the fact that we're going to need to replace 3 elementary schools. We want to do that over the next 30 years or 40 years or 15 years or whatever, and we need to get started right now so that we don't have to replace 3 elementary schools at once in 2035. Maybe that by really hammering home that information, that the results of a poll could change and that the island could then be in favor of a similar proposal that this group was thinking of with finish the middle school and rebuild 1 elementary school, elementary school Y, someplace on the island. And I'm not sure where in my mind I am on which the island would support with those kind of 2 avenues. Right?
So let's do this, because those are excellent points.
Yeah.
So let's do this. Now I'm going to push pause on this, because I think it would be good then to go into the activity and the data and go through all of the other pieces. And I think we should end with this then, because coming back to where we are. So we're going to pass out a visual for you without any context. And what we'd like for you to do at your table groups is to take a look at this visual, digest it, contemplate it, and then we're going to make sense of it as a group. So instead of me standing and delivering, we're going to go constructivist and allow you to construct a meaning out of this, and then we'll talk about it as a group.
These all the same?
They're all the same.
And we're teasing that red is like a negative, right? You never write a check in red, right?
Yeah.
I know.
Oh, so this daggers is in the second one, and this is bond 2.
So take a look at this. I'm giving you this without any context.
Right.
For you to make meaning out of, and then we'll come back.
It seems like
instead of me describing it and giving it to you.
It's really
allowing
like
you to
a
construct
big
the
bond
meaning
with
for
delayed.
Yeah, right, yeah.
So what is it telling us?
Very close separate bonds.
Yeah, I think the elementary.
That's 2 years, right?
2 years later.
So it's a 250
And then
million
bond 1 would be
Which would
finish high school, finish middle school.
which I mean, just
And then-
seems like, I don't know, like.
You're talking numbers, I'm talking
Yeah.
emotions and
And
parents.
then,
When do the
and
kids
then
were
2 years
last
later,
impacted
kind
by
of revisit
COVID,
the
had their
whole
master's school, when are they in 6th grade?
I guess the tricky part would be, it looks like you're trying to have
We said we're
two
not
so
start.
2 different
What
bonds,
grade is
only
that?
2
Is
years
that second grade?
apart. But you would
Which
split
would be,
Well,
they
but-
were,
No, they'll be there next year.
But
Third girls
then
will
like,
be first
but then there's still gonna be always gonna be families where there's,
so is it the first graders that would
but,
get through?
well, but there's always gonna be someone that has like a sibling, right? Like where,
So that one will be ending.
And these certainly would overlap with each other.
This is what I.
But, and then you would
in
stagger
terms of sort of
out
like the COVID.
each thing, right? So you're-
So that was 2020.
So
Wait,
construction
let
would
them
have
get
the
through
same kind of
elementary
design,
school,
you
let them
wouldn't
get
have
through.
So the youngest from kindergarten is 6 years.
Almost
So
done.
that would be almost done, right?
No.
It's a year and a half.
And I think if
It would be those who entered
even if you just
2020, then you
plan to
add 6
discuss
years
Yeah.
of
doing
26,
one
right?
big
We're almost
bond,
there.
you would still stagger a lot of this stuff out. 'Cause
Well, yeah, I mean, depending on, okay, like,
No, because our
elementary
girls were in
school,
first grade
middle
when it
school,
happened.
senior.
oh, in terms of when it ended.
And then the next year she went to middle and
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
She did not make
Okay.
But still,
year.
but still she would have been,
This follows what you were saying about the clear message.
oh, in terms of those kindergartens, right? Like, yeah. It's like, so that's more
We
like
gotta get
28 then.
clear.
Even if one takes that, it's gonna be like 28. 30.
I think that's when it's here.
That's why, I mean, I was very opposed to it.
The ramp up to the bond is 26. You're talking about the ramp up to the bond, right? You're not talking about the actual bond. You're talking about even discussion about the bond.
I'm talking about
Gets
needing
pushed
to
up.
make it very, very
You don't need
clear.
the vote. Yeah, but
And when,
That doesn't mean
and
that
when your
we're
kids,
figures
when that
that
building would be.
Right, we didn't say
That's
that.
one thing.
Because we don't know what was made.
Right, so
pretty darn close.
I don't think you're gonna structure making them still denying that part. Oh, no,
I think it's just
this one,
back
or
in
not
here.
you for Jurassic Park.
Oh, here we go.
I mean, it's still close to your.
The closest action that would go to that would be if the elementary.
Who wants to go first? We're a small community. Like, read your page.
That would be the
And then you
message.
have a willing.
So why
Or if I
why
would-
would you underbuild?
Because I do wonder,
or-
because in
Just see
high
how you
school.
No, I understand that.
Your idea.
No, we know who's gonna show up, there's only 15 people.
It's the same 15 people, but I mean.
You always
don't
Well, we only need 4
Yeah.
we would only need 3 600s.
I
No, I know.
I feel like little, so we do high school science projects, so that's elementary school stuff, just as long as.
But that's CapTech, right?
So
I don't think
there's.
that's just
2 more minutes.
The other trick would be
And it has enough money to cover like
Right.
the entryway.
It's car built.
and that's gonna quash a lot of
Well,
the, until they're not one bursary.
But there's certain I mean, presumably perhaps the playground.
The only two that feel kind of
Like
safe
that might
at this
not
point
be
are like.
nearly as,
Only two of
I
them.
guess the question might be like what high impact relatively low cost, like, like playground.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right, it just,
Brandy's committed.
But even then, like, if it's 16 years, there's playground, like,
Correct.
Yeah.
doesn't matter. I don't remember how to, I mean, I have no idea.
Right?
Yeah, just say yes.
But your entryway.
You've now committed to the district through 2030.
Breezeway between the kid and the buildings.
Yeah.
Are you gonna do that with your check dollars, or are you gonna wait?
1 minute, we'll come back together.
Yeah. Because that being the,
So I'm just throwing something to
some of the money.
Is you can go to K through 4 and then do 5, 6, and a 7, 8.
So research doesn't support it.
It
The
doesn't?
more transitions is where you see the drops, but it doesn't mean the conversation cannot be.
I'm just like throwing it out because it's something that hasn't. really
Bainbridge.
been on the table.
Right.
To your point.
It's been mentioned
discussed,
and just
okay.
not, the evidence doesn't really support it.
To your point, what you said, when you were talking earlier, you know, I do think a lot of people had that winning, right? And now are surprised.
I don't think now we can do that, I think it's the elementary.
And now in here we have. But in general, and now 3% project. There's a, right? Before it was so out
It's
of
almost-
left, you did shock so many people, because they thought we were told this is going to happen and it's not going to happen, and now all of a sudden we're to come.
Well, when we opened before, no one had any idea this.
No,
We knew
and
this.
All right.
I'm not saying you did that on purpose.
No, I
I'm
know.
saying, so I
I think it's
think
1 year,
now the
absolutely.
next conversation might be not easier,
Move
but
on here and then
that
it's
people will be,
Yeah.
people will be listening for whatever school you say.
More data driven.
So let's make meaning out of this. If someone from each table would kind of report out on, you know, what is this saying? And if someone would grab the mic too. Why don't we start off with Colin's table?
I'll put this.
Yeah. Just
I think there was a general concern about them being stacked a little too tightly together. And then moving it out, moving the elementary bond number 2 out a year, feels like we get everything well clear of the kids who parents have been promised that the disruption is not going to occur.
For COVID kids.
Due to COVID, yeah, kids who had to kind of get to COVID. I think that's generally where we got. I think there were also some questions about, you know, where some of the bigger capital expenditures might come from, the dollars for them might come from, like connecting the gym at Park, that kind of thing. But it's probably a separate part of the conversation.
Well, and nobody's excited about funding admin, sorry. So like, can you build that into one of the schools potentially down the line? Because, sorry, except for maybe your parking lot with the ADA issues.
Matt, you want to add on?
Yeah, I guess we just kind of, we're concerned that even kind of pushing the elementary school discussion, you know, down the road a little bit, would we just have the same discussions, you know, a year or 2 years from now, and would time make things a little better or not?
So this is, obviously, if we start stacking bonds and moving on that aggressive time frame, in the top left corner, it also says 11-year plan. So I'm going to have Brandy talk a little bit more about what an 11-year plan kind of really looks like. along those. And so we have, nice catch. And so Randy, I'll turn it over to you.
So I think this is the first two bars are what you had seen. So we have a general election in '24. This indicates a bond in '25 for the middle school with an occupancy then in '28. The soonest we could get started, we have an EP&O levy that runs in '26, which we don't want to jeopardize that. So then the second bond would run 2 years later. Then you have a general election in '28. And so this stacks the other two. You could easily take this out and go on to this and then tack it onto the bottom. So it's just stretching out to 2036. Anything else you want me to cover on that?
Questions on that?
Are the bond dollars in today's dollars or the dollars of that year?
They are escalated
Okay.
to the midpoint of construction on each bond.
In the escalation, is that still using the 6.7%, which is
Uses 5%.
Uses 5%?
I
Using
think,
Northwood is the base 100, or what's?
No, using a separate cost estimate, but it lines up pretty close to Northwoods. I think one thing that's really important to remember is that this is potential bond. This is just to wrap your head around, what the size of that could be. But the whole concept design piece, we would spend 9 months or so really diving into what does that extension on the middle school look like? What are current construction costs? What's a real estimate? We've met with the neighbors. Like, we really have a very solid understanding of what that project is before we go out for a bond. Same would be true of the high school projects. And then the elementary study is just and we could push that out, I suppose, but that's just to figure out really in detail on each of those sites, which one needs a swing school. Or could we build new on site? And we wouldn't really get to the whole idea of renovation until we started to do a real concept design for that site.
Can you explain super quick why we would do bonds in February and not like November presidential?
Yeah, there are districts that do them in November. There were districts that did them this past election cycle. One bond looks like it's going to pass out of 7 across the state.
Correct.
The rest are all failing. And then there are some levies that are on the ballot for November as well. The general sentiment is try not to run any of these during a presidential year, because you're going to get drowned out, and it's really hard to do it during a presidential year.
If I may, Fred.
Yeah.
Also, working with our friends at Piper Sandler, our bond agent, they do studies across the state of the 295 districts, and those districts that run EP&O levies, cap tax, and bonds. Success rates are significantly higher in February than they are in the generals in November.
The reason why you'd want to run one in November is if you were fearful that you'd fail it, and it gives you February to rebound, or April if you need more time before you get into your next fiscal year. So if you were to fail a levy, doing it in November and be able to go back with better information or whatnot by April or February, getting that passed. Holding off until April leaves you with one Hail Mary at the end, which would be August. It's really hard to run elections in August because no one's around. So those are some of those. Dan.
So for something like this, I understand that districts do stack bonds, but I mean, this would be, I guess, triple stacked, with 4 levels. Like, I mean, to what extent do you ever see, it's like, I see this and I see $500 million in less than a decade running at a cadence of every 2 years. I don't know, like the political reality of that, like being passed, like, I don't know.
Yeah, no, and I completely, we've talked about that as well, about whether or not, this would be the most aggressive timeline, right? So, but it gives you a sense of what's happening. Adding in there, this is the other thing that we are always having to pay attention. So building off of what Deb is saying and what you're saying, Dan, is, I'll use this one really quickly, hope everyone can see. we have to keep in mind what's happening in the larger context. So we're going to get an EP&O levy here, trying not to run an EP&O with a bond and keep them separate. Then we also have our Cap Tech. So the EP&O is on the 4-year, Cap Tech on the 6. And then we're watching what's King County doing, because they've got their own levies. And the people who are most excited about this whole process, because it took the focus off of them, is the city. And what are they going to do with their city hall? And so they've been thrilled by us, and they owe us for this.
They're saying 4 or 5 years out.
What's that?
City's saying 4 or 5 years out.
Could be 4 or 5, or it could be 3 years. I don't know what they're going to do. But all of these are the things we're watching, which is why if we're looking at these, and so to the point of if we were to run one, if we were to run a possible bond here, then we wouldn't want to run one here, and then if we don't run it here, we'd probably wait until there. So that kind of helps you to see what's going on contextually. Matt or Brandy want to add to that?
Yeah, I think it shows our community that we are paying attention. We're monitoring what the taxes look like, what the trends are, so we're not, as Dr. Rundle said, stacking EP&Os and Cap Techs and bonds. We're keeping this in the forefront, so we're monitoring this as we go along.
I'm sorry, I might have missed it in my space, but I'm trying to pay attention. I don't know. Anyway, my quick question is, you have the 4 up there. When we go out and present this, do you present all 4 in the timeline, or do you present one at a time? That's what I thought, right? So if we get one, there'll be some sort of completion, right? And then you're going to go back and ask for more for part 2.
Yeah, the long-range facility plan, we need to contemplate more than that, because that's been, I think...
No, I agree with that.
But yes, when we would go out to the community, it's one at a time.
Okay, that's what I thought,
Yeah.
because I'm like, we're going to do one, because they want to see that you do it successfully before they go back and say, okay, yes, I'm willing to give you more money because you did the first one right.
Correct.
And if you messed up the first one, we're never going to pass you.
Right. And I think we missed out on an important opportunity last time by not doing that.
Yeah.
Because we were on time, we were under budget, and we actually saved the taxpayers about $9 million, I think, on that. Brandy, you?
On the bond sales.
On the bond sales, because of the way we did it.
100%.
And
You should have been like swinging from the fences.
Well, I think
I
think we would have been, that was the idea of the last facilities planning committee that started before COVID, and then COVID. So that was the idea for this exact reason.
Yeah, no, because that's the great part, right? If you can show the responsibility and the success, then it's...
And now that we have the communications plan to be able to actually publicize that it was on time and under budget, which most people don't know.
Absolutely.
About what they like in the building, because it's new, and how it's being used. Yeah, the film club should be putting up like promotions and testimonials and all that, because we need to hear from the people that are using it. I mean, so often, like, you walk in and you may or may not love a teacher, but your kid loves them, right?
Right.
Because they don't need to please me, they need to make sure my kid's learning, right? So
the most important thing.
Most important thing, same here, right?
So what we'd like to do is give you more information, and basically what we're doing is kind of bringing you along of, we may want to do this, but what's the reality? So I'm going to have Brandon talk a little bit about what we're thinking, and this is to I think, Matt, you've been hammering this home, which is people don't understand the buckets of money. And this is that bucket of money, which is the Cap Tech levy. So if we're thinking levy dollars, and we're thinking about our elementaries, especially if they're not going to get a new school soon, if we don't do that, what do they get? So Brandon.
So I want to call your attention to draft at the top. This is a working document, and I can stir up a lot of things and get a lot of things going, but we have to be able to pay for it out of the Cap Tech levy. So certainly summer of '24 is optimistic at this point. So I'm sure some things will shift. One of the things we've been talking about is the way we approach the 3 elementaries needs to be the same. So we don't want to go in and carpet one school, and we don't want to do one school each of the 3 years. We'd go in and carpet all at the same time. We would paint all at the same time. We would
do the parking lots at all of them at the same time. So you may see some things shift over time, but they will all shift to the next year. So you've all had a chance to look at this a little bit, so I won't go through all of it with you, but these are the things we're talking about doing at the high school in summer of '24, at Island Park, Lake Ridge, and West Mercer. We would carpet the school, paint the corridors, do the boiler replacements, do the parking lot seal coat, and at Island Park and West Mercer, we have roofs to do. Those are expensive, and they're about $700,000 a piece, so those may shift. Those could probably break apart between years, but that's kind of the gist of what we need to do. Some scheduled out for summer of '25 and summer of '26, and I'm sure the number you're all looking at is kind of what would that 3-year investment be in the elementary schools. It's about $1.8 million for both West Mercer and Island Park. Lake Ridge is less because we re-roofed Lake Ridge 4 years ago, and that's the only difference between them is the roofing cost. And again, as Fred noted, this is cap tech dollars. This is already a levy that's been passed. This isn't anything that would be added. And I think what's important to remember is we don't know at this point which elementary school would go first. And Fred, if you go back to the slide, one more. So if we took bond 2 out and called this bond 2, and then we move this out further, I mean, we're talking like 2038 or 2040 before the last elementary school is done. So, you know, I think this investment needs to be made, and we should go ahead. We've been kicking the can down the road, waiting for the long-range facilities plan to tell us which one to do. And I think the answer is we just need to get in and do it.
So on this one then, we're gonna kind of go back to, you know, Dan, your point, which is, okay, there's a lot of money out there right now. What does this need to look like? So let's talk a little bit about taxes, Matt.
Sure, so this slide I prepare annually for our school board. It's the, as we like to call it, where do your taxes go? If you're a property property owner and taxpayer on the island, you have a total tax rate of $6.12 per 1,000 of assessed valuation. And you can see where the largest chunk is. That big yellow pie piece at the bottom is state schools. That's what the state of Washington collects from you as an owner, and it's 37% of that share. The next big chunk is that light blue part, 21%, which is Mercer Island School District. This is our EP&O levy, a $12 million levy each year. This is our cap tech levy, which we just discussed, about $7.5 to $8 million depending on the year as we go forward. And then also, that's 2014 bond dollars that were approved, and we do have to pay on that each and every year.
Questions on this?
So the light blue is operations for the school district.
It is EP&O. It's educational programs and operation, which basically goes to subsidize or cover the cost the state fails to pay for in those taxes in the yellow part right there. And then the other half, or the other about a third, is the cap tech levy, which we just saw, covers technology, but also those minor cap projects, roofs, boilers, carpets, etc. And then obviously the payment on the bond.
Yeah, I think subsidy is a good way to think about it. We don't get back from the state what we're all paying in, and so we need to subsidize it with levies. So then, Matt's been talking to Piper Sandler. They are the organization that helps us predict and to think about our bonds. And so I'm going to have Matt talk us through how this comes to life. So we're just focusing on the top band, the Plan C or Bond 1. And so you see that 119 figure there. So Matt, take it away from there.
Right, so as Dr. Rundle said, $119 million at what scenario C or version 3, the middle school, etc. And we asked Piper Sandler what would, at this point in time, what they know in the economy, state of interest rates, etc., what would it look like added to that $1.29 you pay at the local level? How much more would you be paying per 1,000 of assessed valuation? They say about 49 cents more for $119 million.
And is there anything daylighting disappearing and dropping off as well?
We're looking at a 9-year in that 2025, and then in 2028, 2029, the 2014s drop off.
Okay.
And then you can kind of look at the tax impact analysis. If you have a home of $1 million to $8 million, what is the monthly increase to your property taxes?
At 49 cents.
Yes, correct.
And this is over 12 years?
This is over 9 years, yes.
Is the 49 cents on top of what we're paying right now? Or
Yes.
is it after the drop off?
It's on top of what we're paying right now.
So, but there's.
They amortize it out over 9 years, they look at interest rates, the economy, and they predict that it'll be roughly about 49 cents. It could change though.
So let's look at, do we have, I guess we don't have that one.
Is there any point in that 9 years where the total that we pay will drop down to what we're currently paying?
No.
No.
And then, of course, every time, so if we go back to this slide, every time we do something more, you're adding more. Now the 49 cents is the biggest jump. And then after that, it's a little bit less. But remember, in 2930 or 2829?
2829,
2829, the 2014 bond comes off the books. And so that's, so you would have this increase, then there would be coming off the books there, which is why this is a really important decision down the road, what we would do with the second bond. And then that also impacts if we're saying that this project is 119, which is C. If you add in an elementary school, that's where personally I get nervous, because now we're talking about a pretty big increase for people. And so when people start looking at this chart, and they start saying, well, 49 cents, this is what's going to happen. What happens when you add another 100, elementary project? So that's thinking about those components.
Fred, if you go back to the slide with the yellow with 4 options on it, I do think one thing that's interesting to think about is if you didn't do this and you did middle school and then you moved to this bond would be coming online about the time the current bond expires. And so, although it would probably still go up a little bit, the impact would be a lot less.
But I also think we're talking about 2025, where we don't know the economics will stay the way it is today. You're going to have a tougher time trying to get people to do both. But I think an easier time, because people do have more money. They're all just a little nervous about everything else.
When you say both, what do you mean?
You were saying adding the elementary school, would it up the price as much as I think maybe that's an option? I think timing-wise for 2025, that's a tough bill for some people, right?
And I think this is where our polling will really come into play. I mean, I say throw this option to the community. I mean, in terms of, like, here's what we could do now, and here's the approximate impact, and then, or we could do this, or we could pass them like together and know that the impact's going to come stacked. I mean, we could see what people.
100% if they're comfortable. So you're saying it's a tough year, so
Yeah.
I think we know what they're going to say, and that's do bond number 2 in 2029. When the tax rate comes down, that's when bond 2 should kick in. So I don't.
But it's not. It doesn't kick in till construction, right? The payment. When does
the implication of selling the bond take place? Is it when construction's complete?
Like when do we get
When do we
tax?
When do they start feeling
When do
it?
taxes go up?
Oh, when do taxes go up? Basically, the next cycle, as soon as we sell those bonds, we can split them. We
But
can
is
sell
that when
immediately
construction's
or a year
complete?
later, but it kicks in very quickly, the next collection cycle.
That's what I say, it's right after.
After the sale, after the vote's approved, yeah.
Yeah.
And we can sell immediately, which we typically do, then it goes to the next cycle, it gets collected in King County, just like that.
Yeah, it's right there, that's what you're voting for.
So Colin, on your statement, if I can just kind of, I think you stated that pretty succinctly, that, this is going to be hard, this is more realistic, this is kind of, if we kind of erase this and went with bond 1 and bond 2, So Colin, in your mind, what should be in bond one, if I could put you on the spot?
I think everything that's listed, though I'm worried about the elementary study. Sorry. I agree with you, Seth. I think too much elementary talk in bond one is risky.
So this being study is synonymous with let's just hold tight on elementary, figure out what's going on with enrollment, figure out what's going on there, but try to, that it's really nothing to do with the elementary.
We've got 4 years.
The cap tech is the elementary.
Right.
We're going to deal with this.
And we have 4 years to plan for the elementary, 4 years of data to collect.
And if it's
To your point, the wording on that's going to be huge. It needs to be, this is a non-issue at this point, this is what's being done. Let's focus on this portion of it, to your point.
And I think if we call it, and I think honestly, call it, just district-wide enrollment study or something like that, because there's going to, and just leave elementary completely out of it, because it is appropriate to study enrollment at the elementary level, the middle school level, and the high school level. And with that, we would know, when the bonds come off the table, what our elementary enrollment, numbers are going to look like 5 years from now.
I agree with you, but I think, and I don't know if I don't want to speak for you, Colin, but I think it just shouldn't be a conversation. It should be a statement and a fact. And now let's focus on this, because I think every time we bring it up, it is always going to be on your mind, right? So it needs to just kind of be discussed and put to bed to some extent for now.
Is there cost associated with elementary study, or is that just a plan?
That's just an operational
Okay.
thing. There's $0. I mean,
Okay.
it's part of the normal operating.
But part of the overall plan is
I would
like
just
it's
keep it in the facilities plan
LRFP only.
only, and
I just think if you bring it up every time you try to push this, you're going to have that.
It's going to be a red herring, yeah. Yeah.
what are you thinking? Are you going to talk more about high school projects?
Not in this meeting, but that, I think where we are here, what I'd like to go back to then is, if I go back to here, the straw proposal then that we're talking about is the middle school, something with the high school, 33% of the high school there. What I'd like to just get a sense from you is what we call a fist of five. A five, what I'll do is I'll ask everyone to just hold up where they kind of stand as committee members. If you hold up a 5, that means I am all in on this C concept. I will champion that, I will help promote that, if that's the will of the board or whatnot, but as a committee, we support that. A 4 is, hey, I'm all behind it, I don't have a ton of time to be in a bunch of more meetings, but I'm behind this. A 3 is, it's great, I'm fine with that, I can live with that. A 2 is, I still have some questions that I'd like to see answered before I can get behind it. And a 1 is, I'd be on next door sabotaging it, and I'm against that. So if you could just, where are you kind of on that fist of 5?
This is just bullet point 1.
This is just doing this as that kind of, that next step. What we're trying to do is get some perspective from you as we round out the long-range facility plan and get it to the board in January. Kind of, I want to make sure that as we've talked and as Colin was just saying, keep elementary out of it. I just want to make sure that we'd all be there.
One question though, because one thing that was brought up during all of the presentations to the community was connecting the gymnasium to the building at Island Park, and it's nowhere in this. I was looking for it, it's not there. Is that Cap Tech or is that this? It's a building project, are we doing it?
How critical do you think it is?
As a parent of children at Island Park, every time there's a school shooting, my mind goes right, it guts me, and I want to keep my kids home. But I'm like, okay, this is just the world we live in. But to me, and because it was brought up so much, I just feel like we need to figure out if that's something our community really wants. I want it, but I am not everyone. I want that done, because it's looking like it could be 10, 15 years till there's a new school there, and that problem is not going to go away. It's still open.
I was just going to ask if that's an enclosed connection, but it could be exterior.
Or is
It
it
could be
actually?
a hallway between the one
Or is it actually-
entrance of the gymnasium over to, like the second one where the bathrooms are, over to that other hallway. Just some way where they don't have to go outside to transition. I just feel like there needs to be something to not have such an open campus there.
Got it. I think some of these cap tech discussions, and I couch it as that, because then we would know whether or not it's possible. In January, Matt and Tony and Randy and others will be going out to each of the schools to do walkthroughs with the principals. So the principals are working right now to start looking at what are the high priorities for them. Based on that, they're going to be talking to PTAs. So that might be something to go to John on and to say, hey, John, I would like to talk to you about this because I know that we're going to be coming out and then we can help with that.
And then seismic. What are we doing about the seismic stuff? Like, our PTA president went to the big PTA meeting they had, and they had this big thing on seismic stuff with the school where the roof fell on the kids. Like,
We've done a full seismic study on all of the schools, and none of them have those issues or those concerns. We have a structural engineer that says, you know, it might not be inhabitable after an earthquake, but it will be safe to exit, and we're not worried about jeopardizing kids.
okay, I will relay that message to Kirsten, because she was all fired up. She actually sent me a text message, so she's like, ask them about seismic, because there's actually grant money for schools, and she thinks our school, like based on the perimeters, might qualify for 20%, you know, of it covered by the state. Anyway, we can talk later. But seismic and that gymnasium connected, that's on my mind for Island Park and all of the schools. Like,
Have we answered it so that you can participate now?
yes.
Okay.
We're,
Jennifer.
sorry. So if we are agreeing with Plan C, do we know the specifics, or that's down the road? We're just agreeing we're going to move forward with middle school and high school and decide on specifics to be funded at a later date?
Later date, but keeping the big concept is consolidation's off the table, and we're still not going to do an elementary school in phase 1.
And the dollar amounts estimated at this point are that ballpark of the 119, and then we'll figure out what that pays for when we get to the nitty-gritty.
Exactly, and then that goes into, I won't go back to the slide, but this whole piece on design and permitting. Then right before that's concept design, that's where all the concept design comes in. Then the design and permitting gets into the actual costing. Did I say that right?
Yeah. Is all the state required updating included? I mean, is that hit with the roof and the boiler?
I think we.
Oh, for the Clean Buildings Act.
Yeah, I think
Yes.
That's all covered?
And I hope that in our estimating, we have given you a number that we're able to come in at, 110 or 115 or 105, right? But we're not going back to you at 135. So.
Well, I don't know, you were off by 4 earlier?
Yeah, he doesn't have a very good track record.
Track record's not great. So I'm not sure about that.
So where are you?
You're waiting to see.
I just.
All right. So we don't have any even 3s, 2s, or 1s. So that's great. I think we've landed where I think, as we heard Josh opened up tonight, here's what he saw as an outsider with information. I think if I go back to some of ours with our stickies and where we are, I know we'd all love to go to an elementary school in this first one. But I think we also know the realities of that, and I would hate to jeopardize, and I think this is what you're saying, to jeopardize any momentum to move forward with the middle school and the other by putting something in that we think could, take us away from mission critical, which is getting something going, because it takes that flywheel concept, and then we can move forward from there. So kind of some next steps then, as we're moving forward. We'll take all of this and we'll put together a full long-range facility plan that we'll take to the board in January. If the decision by the board, it will now go over to, is they're looking at a similar direction, then we'll start that concept design, we'll start really the estimating piece, we'll take a look at close timelines, and then we'll start putting it out there, getting some bids, quotes, so that the board in about a year from now can talk about putting something on a February or an April election, if that's the will of the board. So there, you know, whoever the next two people coming on board to join Maggie, Ty, Deborah, and Dan, that'll be some big work for them, and for us to shepherd along.
Can they set off the conversation?
Yes.
Okay. So are they caught up, the new board members?
I mean, hopefully they'll get caught.
I'm just,
There's always a
Yeah.
learning curve, a huge.
well, that's my concern, because there's a
I
learning curve,
think-
and then to be caught up on all that we've covered till now is,
I think all of the candidates have been
ready.
They've been following.
they've been following and have, yeah.
Yeah.
They've had one-on-one meetings with me, they've met with different board members, and then as part of their onboarding, we spend, you know, in the first 2 months, we spend about 8 hours with them. Matt in finance and operations, they spend time with, learning services, myself, and we go over a lot of these things.
I mean, I know they have some knowledge because they spoke on it and they had concepts and all that kind of stuff, but there's having that, once again, surface knowledge, and then there's having some real
Definitely.
knowledge, right?
Yeah.
That just they need to get to.
Yeah. Carrie.
Yeah, so when do you anticipate like circling back with the community, and when does that happen? Because I feel like now I just sit here and gossip from community members, but it would be great. Like IMS sent their newsletter today, like, please remember to do the survey for the long-range facility planning, and hopefully that was closed already. But it would be great to say, we heard you, we're gonna come back in January, whenever it is. That would be really nice to communicate that, because people gave so much feedback.
And that's exactly what will happen starting after this meeting. We
Okay.
wanted to give you a chance to come back together as a committee first. Definitely owed it to you, maybe strong, but we do. We feel a certain amount of indebtedness, I think, as Deborah and Dan have said along the way. And, you know, this is an important part of getting to the yes at the end. There are hard parts that we have to go through, but sometimes people need to say no to something in order to say yes later. And if you don't involve them, you never get that opportunity, and I think that this is really what that's been. But we will start that process now, and also advertising heavily for January, that's when we're gonna really come forward with the plan, and then the board being able to make some decisions and provide the next banks of the river, if you will, for us to go to work and start engaging community again, but having different conversations, which gets into a whole nother challenge, which is we want this project to go first and we want this one to go first, and that's where being really clear about cap tech versus bond will be critical. So, Debbie.
I have a question about, because like with this other bond we did so well, I was hearing the number, I'm sorry if I misheard this, but that we came in under $9 million. So that goes back to the bond, or is that, what happens with that? Is there?
We just saved the taxpayers that money.
Gotcha,
essentially.
okay.
So we spent the whole, I think it was 99.8, plus we had about 3 million from the state. But the actual bond that was passed, I think, was less than that. Or was it that we actually got 9 million more in the bond sale?
Correct.
Yeah.
That's how that.
So then it just goes back to it saves the taxpayers just aren't charged for that.
Correct.
Okay.
And, you know, being, staying on target, and then there are all kinds of change. There's a whole change process that you go through with change orders. We keep the board up to speed on that. That's Brandy's favorite part of the process, all the change orders, but, you know, really trying to keep those at a minimum too. And the way you do that is you do all the work on the front end, and you're really thorough about that. That's how you avoid those changes later on. I just want to reiterate my appreciation for everyone being a part of this, and there will be more opportunities. We will put kind of an end to this portion of the committee work, and that doesn't mean that you can't be a part of future committees as well, but we know that we kind of asked you basically through last spring. We said there might be one meeting in the fall. We've had a couple more, and it's gone a little longer. Just thanks for hanging in there. Thanks for being great advocates and supporters, thought partners in this. It is not about the board, it's not about me as a superintendent, it's not about Brandy or Matt or Malum, it's about everyone. And at the end of the day, we want what's best for our students and for the community that we get the privilege to work in and you live in. So thank you very much. If you have questions, you can always continue to ask them, but just thank you so much.